Just because you're somebody who doesn't talk a lot, it does not mean that has to be a weakness. Your silence is not a weakness, it's actually a strength. I used to be the quiet kid in class. Not the kind that shoots up the school, but the kind that just doesn't have that much to say. If I don't see something that needs to be said, I'm not gonna say it. And I bet a lot of you watching this are just the same. When you're young and when you're in school, that's usually a problem because that doesn't get you very far. You don't get to make more friends. You don't get to basically get yourself out there. And usually that's seen as a weakness. I saw that as a weakness. Why can't I speak up? Part of it, of course, was the lack of social skills, but that's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about the fact that when you can sit at a meeting and there are people speaking, you don't really give any input because you think it's useless. You watch the other person add and make the exact same point the previous person made. What the fuck's the point of that? That's so useless. It's just gonna drag everything on. Do you know how many 3-hour meetings can be just compressed into a 30-minute meeting? I used to run a lot of meetings in my office, and most of the things that people say can just be completely removed. It doesn't add any new valuable input. So you're probably sitting there in many social interactions, maybe with your friends, and you just don't think that you have anything valuable to add. There's nothing new that you're gonna say that's gonna add something to the conversation, so you just end up listening and not saying anything. And people think, wow, you're a great listener, and you probably are. You're probably an amazing listener. But the main thing is that I'm here to tell you that silence is actually a strength. It took me my entire life to realize this. And only when I was growing and getting older and being part of either meetings or social interactions, that's when I realized that it's actually a strength. Let me break it down for you. The first thing is, and the most obvious, is people that talk a lot, the opposite of people who are silent usually, they end up oversharing. And not oversharing in the way where they say something and you're like, I didn't want to know that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people that say so many things that they actually end up looking dumber. They make themselves look stupid because of how much they talk. And usually, if you talk more, chances of you saying some stupid shit increases. It's just probability. And I know this because in situations where I've been talking a lot and talking continuously, I would notice that I make some mistakes. And it's not stuttering a word, that's not what I'm talking about. It's later, playing it all back, maybe an hour later, 2 hours, doesn't matter, maybe the next day. And you realize, oh, that was a dumb thing to say. That gave people the wrong idea. The point is, every time I watch and observe a person that talks a lot, maybe we're having an interaction and that person is speaking to me lots, I'm a very good listener, but I'm also very good at observing the behavior, not just the words. And the more people talk, the more their actions and their words give away things about themselves, whether they mean it or not. Here's a very easy example. So I used to work at Subway, and at Subway, I'd often end up at the cash because I was good at making no mistakes or minimal mistakes when I was processing orders. Do you know what's the number one way I was able to tell if a person is broke or not? And that was just an observation. I didn't actually care if someone's broke or not. But it was very easy to tell because of this one thing they did. If they would pay with their card and it would decline, the broke person would always start talking a lot. And they would usually say things and explain themselves. They would usually say things like, oh, that's weird. Something's wrong with my bank. Let me go and call them and see what's up. Let me check my account. No, I should have gotten paid the other day. And I'm just like, whatever, do your thing. But the truth was they just didn't have any money in the account. And whatever, it happens. And usually I know these people that come in all the time, they're regulars. I just give them the sandwich anyway. I didn't care. But they were a dead giveaway that there's an actual issue. Because let's think about it. Cards decline all the time. Banks always have issues. That's fine. The people who are confident and let's say they know they have money in their account and they go and buy something and the card declines. Maybe the tap didn't work, so you try again. They never say anything. They never explain themselves. That's how you know the person's actually not hiding anything. And they're usually just like, oh, can I try again? Calmly, peacefully, their heart rate doesn't increase. They're not worried that someone's gonna think that they're poor. They usually handle it very calmly and move on. So when I say a person that talks too much often ends up making a fool of themselves, it's because they often give away a lot more about themselves. If you're someone who can read between the lines, they might be talking about big things they want to do, accomplish, but you're sitting there and you're like, these are the person's insecurities. And if you ask about it and you push on it, you see how defensive they get, which just confirms your suspicion. So if you're someone who doesn't talk a lot, guess what? You're actually protecting yourself. You don't let people know that much about you to where they can target your pain points. Now this leads us into the second thing, which is silence is actually power. When you explain yourself frantically and you try to defend yourself or do any of those things, you're actually reducing your power. I'm not talking about power like political power, anything like that. I'm saying that the power dynamic in a conversation, and there's always one. There's always a power dynamic in the conversation, whether you realize it or not, or whether one person in it realizes it or not. When you end up having to explain things and defend yourself, you are just falling in their eyes. You might think this is crazy. If somebody accuses you of something and you don't defend yourself, what are you supposed to do? Well, let me ask you this. If you're somebody who, smokes a joint here and there once in a while, but you don't have a problem. You don't have to smoke weed every single day. You do it once in a blue moon. And that one time, once in a blue moon that you do it, somebody points out, somebody that you're with, wow, I didn't know you're a smoker. Isn't this bad for you? A person that doesn't have a problem with it, and it's not addicted to it, doesn't actually get offended. So you don't even end up protecting yourself. You don't have to defend it. You'll just probably laugh it off. And the accuser is gonna get the hint that you actually don't have a problem with it. You don't need to sit there and say, actually, no, I don't do this. And no, I'm actually not a smoker. I'm not one of those people. You don't have to say any of that. You can simply laugh at it. The other person will get it, whether consciously or subconsciously, that, nah, you don't have a problem with this. You're not even offended in the slightest bit. Imagine a person who has a problem with this and they're deeply insecure about it. If you say, oh wow, you're smoking weed again, they're gonna hit you with well, I tried to quit and then, it's really hard, but I'm trying to limit it to this much. Actually, and I don't do it that much anymore. Bullshit. That's all bullshit. That's how you know that's a person's pain point. They just lost all their power by explaining it to you or to whoever accused them. So now they're defending themselves. If you get accused for something that you are not or that you did not do, the strongest defense is not defending yourself at all. I'm not talking about where there's actually a problem and you want to defend yourself because it's a misconception about you and you care about that person's opinion of you. Maybe it's a family member. That's different. Even then, I can argue you only need to go so far to defend or explain something about yourself. But generally, if you did nothing wrong or you're not that person, it's pointless. Don't defend yourself. If somebody calls me fat, do you think I'm gonna get upset? Do you think I'm gonna get offended? No. My reaction will literally be zero. Zero emotion. I will ignore it entirely or just look at the person for a couple seconds until they start feeling stupid for the comment they made. Nothing needs to be said. There's so much communication going on without words, non-verbal communication. And most of you who are not aware of it cannot even pick up on it. So I'm making you more aware of these things. And the third thing that silence actually helps you with, and building off of the previous thing I just said, since you gain strength in a conversation, you gain power in a conversation when you don't bother defending yourself over things that don't matter, what happens to the opposite side? When you're silent, the person on the opposite end, or often the accuser, ends up having to face themselves. What does it mean to have to face themselves? You become a mirror to them when you don't defend yourself. By not defending or explaining yourself, you're forcing the other person to reflect back on what they said themselves in that moment of silence. Think about that. Let's say your friend made a very dumb joke or it's insensitive and he knows it's something you don't like, but he makes that joke anyway. Well, first off, you shouldn't be friends with those people anyway, but let's just say that happened. Instead of defending yourself, you stayed silent. You just looked at him. You embraced the silence. You're not afraid of there being silence in the air. And the silence is going to start getting louder. The other person who said those things to you is going to feel the weight of the air. They're suddenly going to lose their balance. They're going to lose their confidence and they're going to lose their edge because their mind is now going to force them to reflect back on what they said. And often the thoughts that go on in their head when there's a long silence after they said something is, what's with this guy? Why isn't he responding? Does this not affect him anymore? Did I overstep the boundary? What if I made him really mad? What if he doesn't like me anymore? What if this affects the future? They start having this feedback loop of what they think they could have done wrong. That's how the brain works. And usually, if they made the wrong comment, it's gonna haunt them in that moment. This way, you never had to address anything they said. You didn't have to defend yourself, but they got the message. And they will never do the same thing again. Because they hate that silence that they dwell in. They don't like the discomfort of that moment where it gets awkward for them. For you, you're used to being silent all your life. You don't talk much. You don't need to say much things. For someone that doesn't speak much in conversations, I've learned to say more without words than most people. I've learned to read in between the lines. I've learned to see what a person actually means or is saying behind the curtain of their words. And the fourth and final thing I'll say is leave some mystery. Don't give everything away about yourself. You become an uninteresting person. Mystery naturally makes a person more interesting. If you're an open book on the first time you meet someone, especially if you're meeting a girl and you're on a date, do you think she's gonna chase you after you just lay out the fact that you're a computer engineer, you earn $100,000 a year, your schedule is 8:30 to 4:30 p.m., and afterwards you like to cook dinner, and on weekends you like to go swimming? If you tell her all of that on the first date, not even prompted, without her asking those things, well, there's no fun in that. There's no mystery. You're not an interesting person. You spill information without interrogation. Damn, that kind of rhymes. But regardless of that, whenever you're in a social interaction, especially when there are more than one person, and you're staying silent for most of the conversation, maybe you're in a meeting and you haven't said anything yet because you haven't felt the need to add anything, naturally, when you do say something, your words will carry a lot more weight than everybody else in that room. You've probably been in those situations yourself, where you don't talk most of the time and then someone says, hey, why don't we listen to what he has to say? He hasn't said anything yet. Maybe he has a better idea. And then when you start speaking, because everybody knows you haven't said a word yet, suddenly everyone's listening. Everybody's quiet. The entire room, the entire circle of people become quiet to listen to what you have to say. And regardless of what you say, if it's something new or it's something dumb or it's a really good thing, people are going to take what you say a lot more seriously. So this is why being a person who doesn't talk a lot is actually a strength and a superpower. Because one, the chances of you saying something stupid are close to none. Two, you don't actually need to speak and defend yourself on trivial matters. Three, your silence actually forces people to reflect on what they've said. And four, your words have a lot more weight when you do say something. And if you're somebody who thinks, well, why is this important? What's this necessary? You clearly haven't been in situations where it matters, or you haven't been conscious of this going on, and then you wonder why you didn't get that job or why you didn't get that girl. This is why. There's a lot more unspoken language than you realize. And that being said, don't let this get to your head to the point where the level of power and respect that your words command don't align with your actions. Because this entire thing doesn't work if your words don't actually mean anything. It doesn't matter how silent you are and the few words you speak, if the words you speak are shit. They're not backed up by anything, they're not followed through on, you don't have a backbone, that's not going to work for you. But if you're the kind of person who is like me, regardless of the level of your social skills, you just don't speak a lot and you've been told it's a weakness your entire life, It's not. It's actually a strength. And it took me my entire life up to this point to realize that. Also, if you're someone who wants to learn these things in depth and really understand how social interactions work, you can check out the link in the description. This is my community where like-minded individuals gather, and there are in-depth programs where I talk about these exact things. If you want to learn how to actually read someone's mind, which people think is a superpower, but you can actually do that. And I will teach you exactly how to read someone's mind. You will know what a person's thinking every single time. You will know how to get that job. You'll know if the interviewer likes you. You'll know if the girl you're on a date with likes you and that you should go through with whatever happens after the date. Or if you should save your time and go find a different girl. Reading people's minds is an actual thing. You can actually do it. Because this is a new community, the price is going to be at a discounted rate for the first 15 people, and it's going to stay like that for a lifetime. Everybody else after the 15 people are going to pay the standard price. See you guys in the next one.